For the people of the Nile, life was but a prelude. The true journey began when the sun set for the final time on their mortal existence. They believed that to achieve eternity, the soul had to embark on a perilous voyage through the Duat, a spiritual realm of gods, demons, and formidable trials. It was a path meticulously prepared for, with tombs built as eternal homes and bodies preserved with sacred rites. Every hieroglyph, every amulet, every spell inscribed on papyrus was a map, a weapon, a key to unlock the gates of the afterlife. This was not an end, but a transformation. A quest to have one's heart weighed against a single feather, to prove a life of balance and truth. At stake was not just survival, but a paradise known as the Field of Reeds, a perfect reflection of the world they had left behind, where they would live forever among the gods. This is the story of that ultimate journey. In ancient Egypt, life was a gift from the Nile, a cyclical rhythm of flood and harvest, birth and renewal. But what of its end? For the Egyptians, the final breath was not a termination, but a profound transformation, a doorway to another, more permanent existence. When a person of status passed from the world of the living, it was not an occasion for uncontrolled despair, but the start of a solemn and urgent duty. The family understood that their loved one had embarked on the most perilous journey of all, and it was their responsibility to provide the vessel and the tools needed for success. The very air in the home would shift, filled with ritualistic chants meant to guide the spiritual aspects of the departed. The Egyptians believed a person was composed of many parts. Two of the most vital were the Ka and the Ba. The Ba, often depicted as a bird with a human head, was the individual's personality, their soul. It had the freedom to leave the tomb and travel between the earthly realm and the underworld, a bridge between what was and what would be. The Ka, on the other hand, was the life force, a spiritual twin born with every person. It was the Ka that required a physical anchor in the world, a recognizable form to inhabit. Without a preserved body, the Ka would be lost, unable to receive the sustenance of food and drink offerings left by the family. This belief was the very cornerstone of their elaborate funerary customs. The loss was real, the separation felt, but the focus was immediately practical and deeply spiritual. The first rites were performed swiftly. The body was washed and purified, a symbolic cleansing before its long journey. The family's primary concern was preventing decay, the ultimate enemy of eternal life. They knew that the physical form, the mortal shell, was the only home the spirit would have in the afterlife. To allow it to break down was to condemn their loved one to oblivion. Thus, with heavy hearts but resolute purpose, the family would entrust the cherished form to a specialized group of priests. These individuals were not mere undertakers. They were sacred technicians, masters of a secret art that would turn flesh into an eternal statue. The body was carried from the home, beginning a 70-day period of seclusion and sacred work, a journey into the heart of preservation that would defy time itself. The destination for the departed was a place known as the Wabet, the House of Beauty. This was not a place of gloom, but a sacred workshop, a space dedicated to purification and the crafting of an eternal vessel. Here, under the watchful eyes of priests who invoked the jackal-headed god Anubis, the protector of embalmers, the great work of preservation began. The process was a well-guarded secret, a combination of surgical precision and religious ritual passed down through generations. The first and most critical step was to halt the natural process of decay from within. The priests would make a small, clean incision on the left side of the abdomen. Through this opening, they carefully removed the internal organs of the stomach, liver, intestines, and lungs. These parts, being most susceptible to decomposition, could not remain. However, they were not discarded. They were considered essential for the afterlife and were separately preserved, washed in palm wine, and placed into 4 special containers known as canopic jars. Each jar's lid was fashioned in the likeness of one of the 4 sons of the god Horus, divine guardians who would protect the organs for eternity. The brain, which the Egyptians did not consider the seat of consciousness, was removed through the nasal passages. The heart, however, was a different matter entirely. Believed to be the center of intelligence, memory, and emotion, the heart was meticulously left inside the body. It was the one organ the deceased would need for the final judgment. It would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, to determine the soul's worthiness. Once the body was cleansed internally, the long process of dehydration began. It was completely covered and packed with natron, a natural salt compound harvested from dry riverbeds. For 40 days, the body rested in this salt bed, which slowly and thoroughly drew out all moisture, the primary agent of decay. This period was deeply symbolic, mirroring the astronomical cycle when the star Sirius disappeared from the sky before its heliacal rising, heralding the Nile's annual flood and the rebirth of the land. After this long wait, the form was removed from the natron, now significantly lighter and permanently preserved. It was a hollowed, hardened shell, a blank canvas ready for the final, intricate stages of its sacred preparation. Once the 40-day purification in natron was complete, the preserved body was taken to another chamber for the final and most artful stage of its transformation. This was the ritual of wrapping, a process that could take over 2 weeks to complete and required hundreds of yards of the finest linen. This was far more than simple bandaging. It was a sacred act of recreation, a magical swaddling that would protect the body and imbue it with divine power for its journey through the underworld. A senior priest, often wearing a mask of Anubis, would preside over the ceremony, reciting incantations and prayers from sacred texts as the wrapping commenced. Each finger and toe was wrapped individually, then the limbs, and finally the torso and head. Between the layers of linen, the priests would place a variety of powerful amulets, each with a specific purpose. The ankh, the symbol of life, was placed in the deceased's hands. The Jed pillar, representing the backbone of the god Osiris, was laid on the chest to provide stability and endurance. The Eye of Horus amulet offered potent protection and healing against any dangers the spirit might face. Perhaps the most important of all was the heart scarab. This large beetle-shaped amulet was placed directly over the heart. Inscribed on its underside was a spell from the Book of the Dead, imploring the heart not to bear witness against the deceased during the final judgment. It was a magical safeguard to ensure a favorable outcome. As the layers of linen built up, they were coated with a warm, liquid resin. When this resin cooled and hardened, it created a waterproof, protective shell around the body, sealing the amulets in place and providing a rigid structure. The final step was the placement of the funerary mask. For a pharaoh like Tutankhamun, this would be an effigy of solid gold and precious stones. For a lesser noble, it might be made of cartonnage, layers of linen and plaster, but it was always an idealized portrait. The mask was not just a likeness. It was the divine, perfect face the deceased would wear for all eternity. Once the final strip of linen was tied and sealed, the process was complete. The body was no longer a mere human form. It had been transformed into a Sa, a perfected spiritual body, a divine statue ready to receive the soul. The 70-day period of preparation was over. The mummified form, now sealed within a series of ornate, nested coffins, was transported with great ceremony from the embalming workshops back to the west bank of the Nile. A procession of family, friends, and professional mourners accompanied it to the entrance of its newly prepared tomb. Here, propped upright by a priest, the coffin faced the world of the living one last time. Before it could be sealed away forever, one final, crucial ritual had to be performed, the opening of the mouth ceremony. This ancient rite was the mystical key that would unlock the afterlife. Without it, the deceased would be trapped within an inert vessel, unable to see, speak, or partake in the offerings essential for eternal survival. The ceremony was a piece of powerful religious theater, typically performed by the deceased's heir, establishing their new role as head of the family, or by a high-ranking Sem priest, identifiable by the leopard skin he wore. The priest held a collection of symbolic instruments. The most important was a ritual adze, a tool shaped like a chisel. While reciting sacred spells, the priest would approach the coffin and gently touch the adze to the areas of the mouth, eyes, nose, and ears on the mask. This was not a physical act of opening, but a profoundly magical one. Each touch was believed to awaken a specific sense. Touching the mouth restored the ability to speak and eat. Touching the eyes restored sight, allowing the spirit to witness the glories of the underworld. The ritual symbolically severed the final ties to a silent, motionless state and reanimated the spiritual faculties of the individual within. The incantations called upon the gods to undo the effects of the mortal decline, to breathe life back into the preserved form so it could function as a complete being in the next world. It was the ultimate act of provision from the living to their beloved departed, a final gift of empowerment. With the senses now magically restored, the mummy was no longer just a protected body. It was a fully activated spiritual vessel. The final farewells were made, and the coffin was slowly carried past the threshold into the cool interior of the tomb, leaving the bright Egyptian sun behind for good. The tomb was not seen as a final resting place. To the ancient Egyptians, it was the Perjet, the house of eternity. It was a machine for living forever, a magical portal between the physical world and the divine afterlife. For a pharaoh, this house might be a vast, multi-chambered complex carved deep into the Valley of the Kings. For a nobleman, it might be a smaller but no less elaborate structure on the Theban necropolis. Regardless of size, its function was the same: to provide a secure, comfortable, and well-provisioned home for the Ka, and a base from which the Ba could journey forth. The architecture was deliberately divided. An outer chapel, often beautifully decorated, was accessible to the living. Here, family members could visit and leave offerings of food, beer, and incense, sustenance that would be magically consumed by the Ka of the deceased. Beyond this public space lay the burial chamber, a hidden and sealed room designed to protect the mummy from all disturbances for millions of years. The walls of these inner chambers were not merely decorated, they were enchanted. The vibrant paintings and carved reliefs were a magical insurance policy. Scenes of bountiful harvests ensured the deceased would never go hungry. Images of servants, butchers, and brewers guaranteed eternal service. Depictions of the tomb owner in the presence of gods like Osiris and Ra secured their divine protection and acceptance. These images were meant to magically become real in the afterlife. The tomb was also filled with a carefully curated selection of grave goods. These included everything the person might need or desire: ornate furniture, chests of fine clothing, jewelry, cosmetic palettes, and even board games like Senet to pass the time. A king like Tutankhamun would be equipped with golden chariots, weapons, and royal regalia. For everyone, the most essential item was a copy of the Book of the Dead. This papyrus scroll was a personalized guide to the underworld, containing the spells, hymns, and passwords needed to navigate the treacherous journey through the Duat, overcome hostile demons, and successfully pass the final judgment. Sealed inside this eternal palace, armed with magical texts and surrounded by every earthly comfort, the spirit was finally prepared. The physical preparations were complete. The true spiritual odyssey was about to begin. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not a final destination, but the start of a perilous journey. No traveler would dare enter an unknown and dangerous land without a map, and for the soul embarking on its voyage through the afterlife, that essential guide was the collection of texts we call the Book of the Dead. To the Egyptians, it was known by a more hopeful name, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. This was not a single standardized volume like a modern holy book. Instead, it was a personalized compilation of spells, hymns, and instructions, meticulously prepared for an individual to navigate the challenges of the underworld, overcome its dangers, and successfully enter the paradise of the Field of Reeds. The scrolls, often beautifully illustrated, were placed within the tomb, sometimes tucked among the mummy's linen wrappings, serving as a constant companion for the spirit. Its contents were a spiritual toolkit, essential for survival in a realm governed by magical laws. Spell 125, for instance, contained the negative confession, a list of transgressions the deceased would declare they had not committed, a crucial part of their final judgment. Spell 30b was an appeal to the deceased's own heart, inscribed on a scarab amulet placed over the mummy's chest, beseeching it not to bear witness against them when it was weighed against the feather of truth. Other spells provided the power to transform into various animals, such as a swift falcon or a divine swallow, allowing the soul to travel freely between the earthly and heavenly realms. There were incantations to repel hostile creatures, to breathe air and drink water in the underworld, and to ensure the soul would remember its own name, a critical component of its identity. For the wealthy, these papyrus scrolls were masterpieces of scribal art, with vibrant illustrations depicting every stage of the journey. For those of more modest means, a smaller selection of the most vital spells might suffice. Regardless of its length or artistry, the Book of the Dead represented a profound belief in a structured afterlife and the power of knowledge and preparation. It was a testament to the Egyptian conviction that with the right words and a pure heart, the path to eternity was not just possible, but assured. The soul was now equipped with its sacred map. The first step into the twilight realm, however, was a test all its own. The final rites on earth are complete. The opening of the mouth ceremony has been performed, magically reawakening the senses of the deceased, allowing the spirit to see, hear, and speak once more. Now, the soul stands at a profound threshold, the boundary between the world of the living and the vast, mysterious realm known as the Duat. This was the Egyptian underworld, a complex, multi-layered reality that was both a place of judgment and a landscape of cosmic regeneration. The journey begins at the western horizon, the place where the sun god Ra began his own nightly descent. Here, the soul, a combination of its personality, the Ba, and its life force, the Ka, must leave the physical world behind. The first great obstacle was often depicted as a symbolic body of water, a celestial river that separated the two realms. To cross it, the soul required the aid of a divine ferryman, a figure known as Mahaf. But passage was not granted easily. Mahaf was a challenging figure who would test the soul's knowledge. The deceased had to address him correctly, using the proper honorifics and demonstrating their understanding of the sacred. They had to prove they were worthy of making the crossing by reciting specific spells from their Book of the Dead. This was the first of many trials, a spiritual password required to gain entry into the world of the gods. This liminal space was filled with a sense of awe and trepidation. The familiar light of the living world faded into a perpetual twilight, and the landscape was populated by beings both divine and strange. The soul was vulnerable here, stripped of its mortal coil and reliant entirely on its spiritual preparation. This initial crossing was a profound act of separation, a final farewell to the earthly plane and an acceptance of the new reality. It was a moment of transformation where the spirit fully embraced its new form, ready to face the trials that lay ahead in the intricate geography of the Duat. Having successfully persuaded the ferryman, the soul steps onto the divine barge. The shores of the living world recede into mist, and ahead lies a new horizon. The soul is now a traveler in the same realm as the gods, following the nightly path of the sun itself, but the journey has only just begun. As the soul of the deceased takes its first tentative steps into the Duat, it finds it is not alone. A far grander cosmic drama is unfolding. The entire structure of the underworld, its perils and its promise of rebirth, is defined by the nightly voyage of the great sun god, Ra. For the Egyptians, the setting of the sun was not its end, but the beginning of its most important work. Ra, having aged throughout the day, entered the western gate of the underworld in his magnificent solar boat, the Manjet. Here, he began a 12-hour journey through the Duat, a voyage that was both a battle for survival and a process of profound rejuvenation. He traveled through the darkness to defeat the forces of chaos and ensure that the sun would rise again, bringing life and light to the world. This journey was the template for the deceased's own path. The underworld was Ra's realm, but it was not a safe haven, even for him. In the deepest, darkest hour of the night, Ra faced his ultimate nemesis, Apep, a colossal serpent who embodied chaos and oblivion. Apep's singular goal was to swallow the solar boat and extinguish the sun forever, plunging the cosmos into eternal darkness. The battle was fought anew each night. Ra was not alone on his barge. He was accompanied by a powerful retinue of other gods who formed his divine crew. The formidable god Seth, often a chaotic force himself, stood at the prow, using his immense strength to spear the great serpent. Thoth, the god of wisdom, used his magic to navigate the treacherous paths, while other deities helped fend off the lesser demons that swarmed around the boat. The deceased soul's greatest hope was to be judged worthy of joining this divine entourage. To be welcomed aboard the Manjet was to receive the ultimate protection and to participate directly in the victory of order over chaos. The spells within the Book of the Dead were filled with pleas and declarations intended to grant the soul passage onto this sacred vessel. By aligning their personal journey with Ra's cosmic cycle, the deceased sought to share in his nightly renewal and his glorious rebirth at dawn. The soul is now a participant in this epic struggle, a witness to the nightly war for the fate of the universe. To earn their place in the sun god's protective light, however, they must first navigate the Duat's distinct regions, each sealed by a formidable gate and its fearsome guardian. The journey through the Duat was not a simple, linear path across an open landscape. It was a highly structured and sequential progression, a divine obstacle course designed to test and purify the soul. Ancient Egyptian funerary texts, such as the Amduat and the Book of Gates, map this underworld in meticulous detail. They reveal a realm divided into 12 distinct regions, corresponding to the 12 hours of the night. Each of these regions was a world unto itself, with unique inhabitants, challenges, and landscapes. Some were benign, like fertile fields where blessed spirits resided. Others were perilous, containing lakes of fire or caverns filled with hostile beings. To move from one hour of the night to the next, the soul had to pass through a massive fortified gateway. These were not mere architectural features. They were powerful, sentient entities that actively barred the way to the unworthy. Each of the 12 gates had a secret name and was protected by at least one fearsome guardian. These guardians were often depicted as imposing, composite beings, sometimes with the head of a crocodile or a jackal, brandishing large blades to emphasize their protective role. Passing a gate was a ritual trial. The deceased could not force their way through. Instead, they had to demonstrate their spiritual knowledge and moral purity. Approaching the gate, the soul, guided by their Book of the Dead, had to address both the gate and its guardian by their correct, secret names. This act of naming demonstrated power and understanding. Following this, the soul would recite a specific spell or declaration associated with that particular gate, often asserting their innocence and their alignment with Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order and truth. This process was repeated at every hour. Each successful passage was a step toward purification, allowing the soul to shed its earthly impurities and draw closer to the divine. It was a methodical and demanding process. Failure at any single gate meant the soul's journey would end in oblivion, its identity lost forever in the deep regions of the Duat. The journey is a relentless test of the soul's preparation and character. Having navigated the treacherous landscapes and appeased the 12 gatekeepers of the night, the soul has proven its mettle. It now approaches the climax of its entire existence, the final reckoning in the great hall of two truths. The path through the Duat was far from empty. It was a vibrant, populated realm, teeming with a vast and complex array of supernatural beings. These were the denizens of the afterlife, a diverse host of guardians, enforcers, and spirits who could either help or hinder the soul on its journey. The most famous were the gatekeepers, but the underworld's population was much larger and more varied. Many of these entities were profoundly dangerous, embodying the hazards the soul had to overcome. Funerary texts give them evocative and intimidating names, such as He Who Lives on Snakes or Blood Drinker from the Slaughtering Block. Their role was to punish the impure and to prevent the unworthy from proceeding. Their appearance was often a terrifying composite of powerful predators, the head of a lion, the body of a hippopotamus, the tail of a crocodile, a visual representation of their formidable nature. Yet, it is crucial to understand that these beings were not seen as purely evil in a modern sense. They were an essential part of the divine order, the agents of Ma'at, or cosmic justice. They functioned as a celestial immune system, identifying and removing souls that would bring imbalance to the perfect order of the afterlife. Their presence ensured that the paradise of the field of reeds remained pure. Alongside these fearsome guardians, there were also helpful entities. The soul might encounter the blessed spirits of the righteous dead, known as the Axe, who could offer guidance. The four sons of Horus, Imseti, Hapi, Duamutef, and Kebesenuef, who guarded the deceased's internal organs in their canopic jars, also extended their protection into the Duat. The very landscape could be a trial. The soul had to navigate fiery lakes and treacherous caverns. For the unworthy, these places meant annihilation. But for the righteous soul, armed with the correct spells from the Book of the Dead, these dangers could be passed safely. The fire would not burn them. The hostile creatures would not harm them. This complex ecosystem of guardians and trials reinforced the core Egyptian belief that a blessed afterlife was not a guarantee, but an achievement. It had to be earned through a virtuous life on earth and meticulous spiritual preparation. Having faced down the monstrous guardians and navigated the perilous terrain, the soul has proven its resilience and its right to advance. The final destination is now in sight, the Hall of Judgment, where the ultimate test awaits. Here, the soul will stand before the great god Osiris himself, and its heart will be weighed against a single, perfect feather. Having passed through the gates of the underworld, the soul of the deceased finds itself not on a journey of quiet reflection, but in the midst of a cosmic war. Aboard the majestic sunboat of the god Ra, the soul sails across a celestial river, traversing the 12 hours of the night. This is not a passage for the timid, for in these deep realms lurks the ultimate embodiment of chaos, the great serpent, Apep. Apep is not a god to be worshipped, but a primal force of dissolution, the antithesis of Ma'at, the divine order that holds the universe together. Each night, as Ra's boat makes its journey to bring the dawn, Apep attacks, seeking to swallow the sun and plunge creation into eternal stillness. The soul, now identified with the divine, is no mere passenger. It is a warrior for creation, a defender of the light. The Book of the Dead provides the necessary spiritual arsenal for this conflict. These are not simple prayers, but powerful incantations, magical formulas honed over centuries to protect the divine vessel. Spells for repelling the serpent are recited with focused intent. The words themselves are weapons, forming a protective shield around the barge. The texts speak of a divine crew assisting Ra, with the powerful god Seth standing at the prow, ready to spear the monstrous serpent. The soul joins this divine company, adding its voice to the chorus of protective magic. On earth, in temples across the land, priests performed parallel rituals. They would create effigies of the serpent, spit upon them, bind them, and perform symbolic acts of destruction to magically weaken the great enemy in the spiritual realm. For the soul on the boat, this was a lived reality. It had to confront this terrifying personification of chaos, using the sacred knowledge it had acquired. The battle rages through the hours of the night, a relentless struggle between order and entropy. The churning of the celestial waters, the roars of the serpent, and the powerful chants of the gods form the symphony of this nightly war. Success means the sun will rise again, both in the world of the living and for the soul itself. Failure is unthinkable. As the final hour of the night approaches and the serpent is once more repelled, a faint light appears on the horizon. The soul has survived the cosmic battle, but its personal trial is only just beginning. After surviving the nightly assault of chaos, the soul arrives at the threshold of the most solemn phase of its journey, the final judgment. The cosmic battle was a test of strength and alliance with the gods, but this next stage is a trial of character, a deep examination of the soul's own moral fabric. The soul is led into a vast, silent chamber to perform what is known as the negative confession, a pivotal ritual detailed in spell 125 of the Book of the Dead. Before the soul stands a formidable assembly, 42 divine assessors, each a judge responsible for a specific type of wrongdoing. This is not a confession in the modern sense, where one admits to faults. Instead, the deceased must proactively declare their innocence, asserting a lifetime of adherence to Ma'at. It is a powerful assertion of a pure heart. Addressing each of the 42 judges by their name, the soul begins its recitation. I have not committed sin. I have not stolen. I have not caused anyone to be hungry. I have not told lies. I have not been deaf to words of truth. I have not been angry without just cause. I have not polluted the water. The list is extensive and remarkably insightful, forming a comprehensive moral code for ancient Egyptian society. It covers not only major offenses like theft and causing harm, but also social transgressions such as gossip, arrogance, and stirring up strife. It speaks to a profound understanding of social harmony, respect for the gods, and even environmental responsibility. In ancient Egypt, the spoken word held immense creative and destructive power. This ritual was therefore a potent magical act. By correctly reciting the denials, the soul was not merely recounting its past, it was magically affirming its own purity, aligning its essence with the fundamental order of the universe. The stakes were absolute. Each declaration had to be made with a pure heart and unwavering conviction. Any falsehood, any hesitation, would betray the soul's unworthiness. This was the ultimate test of integrity, where the entirety of one's life was laid bare through this carefully structured, ritualized declaration. Having addressed each of the 42 assessors, the soul falls silent. Its words, a testament to a life lived in balance, echo in the great hall. The confession is complete. Now, it must be verified. The recitation of innocence is complete. The soul now proceeds from the antechamber of the assessors into the heart of the underworld's judiciary. the magnificent Hall of Two Truths. This is the sacred space where the final verdict will be rendered, a place of ultimate balance and cosmic law. The hall is not a place of shadows, but is depicted in papyri as an orderly and majestic court, befitting the gravity of the proceedings. Its very name suggests the harmony the Egyptians so valued, perhaps representing the unified truths of Upper and Lower Egypt, or the alignment of personal conduct with divine principles. At the far end of the hall, presiding over the entire assembly, sits the great god Osiris, lord of the afterlife. He is shown in his iconic form, wrapped as a mummy to signify his own resurrection, wearing the Atef crown and holding the crook and flail, symbols of his authority and power to give life. He is not a wrathful judge, but the embodiment of hope and rebirth, the one who triumphed over his own end. To his side stands Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, knowledge, and writing. With his scribe's palette and reed pen, he is the divine clerk of the court, ready to meticulously record the outcome of the trial. His presence ensures that the verdict will be documented and preserved for all eternity. The 42 assessors, whom the soul has just addressed, are also present, lining the walls as silent witnesses to the final procedure. And waiting patiently nearby is a formidable creature named Ammit, the Devourer. With the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, she is the personification of the consequence of failure. She is not an evil being, but a necessary part of the cosmic order, the one who ensures that only the pure may proceed. The soul, having declared its purity, now stands in this divine space, surrounded by the pantheon of judgment. The air is still with anticipation. All eyes turn towards the center of the hall, where the instrument of judgment rests, a large, perfectly crafted golden scale. The soul's long journey through the underworld, its battles with demons and its magical recitations, have all led to this single, silent, and decisive moment. As the soul stands before the great scale in the Hall of Two Truths, a familiar figure steps forward. It is Anubis, the god with the head of a jackal, who has been a silent presence throughout the soul's journey. His role now becomes central to the entire process. Anubis is one of the most ancient gods of Egypt, originally the preeminent lord of the dead, before the rise of the Osiris cult. His deep connection to the afterlife is multifaceted. As the inventor of embalming, he is the master of the rituals that preserve the physical form, making the transition to the afterlife possible. As the guardian of the necropolis, his jackal form was associated with the cemeteries located on the edge of the desert. He is the opener of the ways, the one who knows the secret paths of the underworld, and has guided the deceased safely to this very hall. Now, in the final judgment, he is not the judge, but the calm and expert administrator of the ceremony. He is the master of the scales, ensuring that the weighing is conducted with divine precision and impartiality. His presence is not meant to be intimidating, but reassuring. He is the trusted guide, leading the soul through the final, most critical rite of passage. With a gentle and dignified motion, Anubis approaches the deceased. He reaches for the soul's heart, the IB, which the Egyptians believed was the seat of intelligence, emotion, and conscience. This is the one organ that was purposefully left inside the mummified body, for it was the record of one's entire life. Anubis carefully takes the heart and places it onto one of the golden pans of the scale. His movements are precise, his focus absolute. He then checks the balance, ensuring the mechanism is true. He is the divine technician, the guardian of the integrity of the process. His role is to facilitate the judgment, not to influence it. He stands between the soul and the judge, Osiris, acting as the essential intermediary who sets the stage for the verdict. All of his prior work, preserving the body, guiding the spirit, culminates in this one action. With the heart now resting in the balance, Anubis steps back, his duty almost complete. He watches the scale, his sharp eyes missing nothing, as the defining moment of the soul's eternal fate arrives. The moment of truth has arrived. In the silent, sacred space of the Hall of Two Truths, the heart of the deceased rests on one pan of the great golden scale. Anubis, the divine officiant, has stepped back. Osiris, the ultimate judge, watches from his throne. Thoth, the scribe, stands ready to record the verdict. The entire pantheon holds its breath. On the other pan of the scale, Anubis places the counterweight. It is not a piece of gold or a heavy stone, but something almost weightless, a single, pristine ostrich feather. This is the feather of Ma'at, the symbol of the goddess of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. She represents the fundamental principles by which the universe operates, the ethical and moral standard against which all actions are measured. The weighing of the heart is the ultimate test of a soul's worth. It is not a measure of wealth, status, or worldly power. It is a judgment of one's character. The heart, which has recorded every deed, every word, and every thought from a person's life, is now weighed against the pure, simple embodiment of truth. The scale begins to move. There are two possible outcomes, two eternal fates hanging in the balance. If the soul has lived a life in accordance with Ma'at, if it is unburdened by wrongdoing, its heart will be as light as the feather. The scale will balance perfectly. When this happens, the soul is declared Ma-Keru, or true of voice. Thoth records the favorable verdict, and Osiris welcomes the justified soul into the field of reeds, a blissful paradise and an idealized version of Egypt where they will live for eternity. However, if the heart is heavy with the weight of misdeeds, lies, and injustice, it will tip the scales, outweighing the feather of truth. This is a verdict of failure. Thoth records the condemnation. The heart is judged unworthy to continue its existence. For this soul there is no eternal torment, but a fate considered far worse, absolute annihilation. The heavy heart is cast from the scales and given to the waiting creature, Ammit the devourer. She consumes it, and in that moment, the soul's existence is utterly extinguished. This is the second death, from which there is no return, no memory, no being. It is the complete and final end. The balance beam teeters, caught for a breathless instant between two eternities, everlasting paradise or total oblivion. Within the vast, silent expanse of the Hall of Two Truths, the soul of the deceased stands at the precipice of eternity. Before them, the great golden scales, the instrument of ultimate justice, wait to perform their sacred function. 42 divine assessors observe, their presence a testament to the gravity of the moment. Yet, this is not a chaotic trial of accusations and defenses. It is a meticulous, orderly procedure, overseen and recorded by one of the most revered figures in the entire pantheon, Thoth, the divine scribe. He is the master of knowledge, the inventor of writing, the vizier of the gods, and the incorruptible clerk of this celestial court. Often depicted with the head of a sacred ibis, his long, curved beak probing for truth, or as a thoughtful baboon, an animal noted by the Egyptians for its intelligence, Thoth embodies intellect and impartiality. He does not preside as a judge. His role is far more fundamental. He is the guarantor of the process, the keeper of the official record. In his hands, he holds a scribe's palette and a reed pen, ready to inscribe the final verdict onto a scroll of papyrus, making it an immutable fact of the cosmos. His presence ensures that the judgment is not subject to whim or emotion, but is based on the unassailable evidence presented. The Egyptians held the written word in profound reverence. Hieroglyphs were not mere symbols. They were medu necher, the words of the gods. To write something down was to give it tangible, lasting reality. Therefore, Thoth's act of recording the outcome of the weighing of the heart is a powerful magical and administrative act. He is the divine bureaucrat who transforms a spiritual event into an official, permanent reality. He is the voice of reason in a hall filled with divine power, a calming influence who ensures that Mayat, the principle of cosmic order and truth, is upheld with precision. As the heart of the deceased is placed on one pan of the scale and the feather of Ma'at is placed on the other, Thoth watches with focused attention. His gaze is not one of condemnation or approval, but of pure, objective observation. He is there to document the truth, whatever it may be. The pen is poised, the scroll is ready. The entire weight of a lifetime is about to be measured, and it is Thoth who will give that measurement its eternal voice. The air in the Hall of Two Truths grows heavy with anticipation as the golden beam of the scales begins to move. For the soul on trial, this is the moment that eclipses all others. It is the culmination of a lifetime of choices, a final reckoning where every deed, every word, and every thought is tallied. On one side of the scale sits the single, weightless feather of Ma'at, the embodiment of truth, justice, and cosmic harmony. On the other rests the Ib, the heart of the deceased, believed by the Egyptians to be the seat of intelligence, emotion, and conscience. A worthy soul, one who had lived in accordance with Ma'at, would have a heart as light as the feather. But if a life was filled with wrongdoing, falsehood, theft, envy, or disrespect for the divine, the heart would be heavy, burdened by the weight of these transgressions. The scales would tip, and the verdict would be clear. The Book of the Dead provides insight into this moral examination through the negative confession. Here, the deceased addresses the divine assessors, declaring their innocence by listing the specific misdeeds they have not committed. I have not caused harm. I have not stolen. I have not spoken lies. This was not a plea for mercy, but a confident declaration of a life lived in balance. However, the heart itself was the ultimate witness. It could not lie. As the pan holding the heart sinks lower, a profound stillness falls over the divine assembly. The gods watch, their expressions unreadable, for this is not a matter of their opinion, but a simple, mechanical measurement of truth. The soul's journey through the treacherous paths of the Duat, its successful recitation of spells and passwords, all of it means nothing if the heart fails this final test. This outcome represents a fundamental disruption of cosmic order. A soul so heavy with impurity cannot be permitted to enter the perfected paradise of the field of reeds, as its very presence would introduce chaos into a realm of perfect harmony. The sinking of the scale is more than a simple failure. It is a cosmic disqualification, a stark confirmation that this individual's essence is incompatible with eternity. Thoth, the ever-vigilant scribe, observes the final position of the beam and prepares to record the unfavorable result. The judgment is rendered. The heart is unworthy. For this soul, the gates to paradise are now sealed forever, and a far different fate awaits. As the scales deliver their unsparing verdict and Thoth records the failure, a new presence makes itself known. From the foot of Osiris's throne, a creature of formidable appearance rises. This is Ammit, a name that translates to devourer of the damned or eater of hearts. She is not a demon or a force of chaos. On the contrary, she is a crucial component of the divine order, the final consequence for those who lived a life against Ma'at. Her physical form is a composite of what the ancient Egyptians considered the most dangerous animals in their world. She possesses the head and jaws of a crocodile, the powerful forelimbs and torso of a lion, and the massive hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This combination symbolized an inescapable and final power. Yet, Ammit is depicted not as a ravenous monster, but as a patient and dutiful enforcer of the divine will. She waits attentively through every judgment, a silent reminder of the stakes. For the soul whose heart has been found heavy, Ammit represents the ultimate terror, not eternal punishment, but complete and total oblivion. The Egyptian concept of the afterlife was centered on continuation. They sought to preserve their name, their body, and their spirit for all time. To be consumed by Ammit was to have that continuation utterly denied. The unworthy heart, the vessel of the soul's identity and memory, was given to her. The act of her consuming it was known as the second passing, from which there was no return. The soul was not sent to a realm of torment. It was simply unmade, its existence erased from the cosmic record. It would have no place in the field of reeds, nor would it haunt the world of the living as a restless spirit. It would cease to be. This belief served as a powerful moral compass for the living. The prospect of non-existence was a far greater deterrent than any depiction of an underworld filled with suffering. It encouraged adherence to the principles of Ma'at by presenting the most absolute consequence imaginable. Ammit was the finality at the end of a wicked life, the guardian who ensured that the purity of the eternal realm remained absolute. Her presence guaranteed that only the worthy, the true of voice, would proceed, preserving the perfection of the afterlife that Osiris ruled. For the soul whose heart has balanced perfectly against the feather of Ma'at, a wave of profound relief washes over its spiritual form. The trial is over, and its virtue has been affirmed. Now, vindicated and declared Ma-Keru, true of voice, the soul is ready for the final step of its judgment. It is led by the falcon-headed god Horus, the dutiful son and heir, into the direct presence of the king of the afterlife himself. Seated on a magnificent throne in the deepest part of the hall is Osiris, the lord of the underworld, the symbol of resurrection and eternal life. His story was central to the Egyptian understanding of existence. Once a benevolent king on earth, he was betrayed by his jealous brother, Set. Yet, through the devotion and powerful magic of his wife, Isis, he was brought back from his state of incompletion to rule over a new kingdom, the realm of the blessed. This personal journey from terrestrial king to celestial ruler made him the ultimate arbiter of a soul's fate. He was not a fearsome judge, but one who understood transition and renewal. His appearance is iconic. He is depicted wrapped in the white linen of a mummy, a symbol of his own transformation. His skin is often green or black, representing the fertile silt of the Nile and the promise of new growth and rebirth. In his hands, he holds the crook and flail, emblems of kingship and the fertility of the land. Upon his head rests the tall, white Atef crown, flanked by two ostrich feathers. The soul is presented before this serene and powerful deity. This is not another trial, but a formal acceptance. Thoth steps forward and presents the result from the scales, officially reporting that the deceased has been found worthy. Horus confirms the soul's right to enter his father's kingdom. Osiris listens, his gaze ancient and wise. His acceptance is the final, official seal on the soul's journey. By his decree, the deceased is formally welcomed into the eternal community. This moment represents the successful completion of the most arduous journey imaginable. The soul has overcome the dangers of the underworld and has been morally vindicated. It has earned its place among the Aku, the blessed and effective spirits. Osiris's judgment is the final word, the divine pronouncement that opens the gateway to paradise and grants the soul the one thing it has sought above all else, life everlasting. With the blessing of Osiris, the soul passes from the hall of two truths into a realm of perpetual light and abundance. The perilous journey is over. Ahead lies a landscape of unimaginable peace and perfection, the final destination for the justified, Aaru, the field of reeds. This was the Egyptian vision of paradise, and it was not an ethereal, abstract heaven, but an idealized and perfected reflection of the life they knew and loved along the Nile. The field of reeds was a vast, fertile land where the sun always shone, the waters were always pure, and the harvests were eternally bountiful. The reeds grew taller than any mortal had ever seen. The wheat stood high and golden, and the fruit trees were forever laden with their bounty. Here, all the best aspects of earthly existence were preserved and magnified, while all the hardships, illness, famine, toil, and sorrow were banished forever. Life in Aru was not one of idle contemplation. The Egyptians believed that meaningful activity was essential to a happy existence. Thus, the blessed were expected to plow, sow, and reap in these perfect fields. However, the labor was light and the rewards immense, yielding crops of a size and quality unheard of in the mortal world. To assist with these tasks, the deceased were buried with small statuettes called shabti. These were enchanted figures intended to act as the soul's servants. Should the deceased be called upon to perform any labor, they could command a shabti to answer in their place, leaving the soul free to enjoy the pleasures of paradise. One of the most cherished aspects of the field of reeds was the promise of reunion. Family members and loved ones who had also been judged worthy would be there, waiting. Husbands and wives, parents and children could find one another again, to live together for all time in this blissful landscape. It was a place of community, of feasting, and of simple, profound joy. It represented the ultimate triumph, the continuation of identity, family, and the Egyptian way of life, secured for all time. Here, under the benevolent watch of the gods, the soul would live forever, nourished by the celestial Nile, a complete and eternal being in a land of unending perfection.